r/NoSleep. Posted by u/Shribin_04 to 1389. I went on my first hunt with my uncle. He gave me a list of rules I need to follow. Yesterday, when my parents informed me about a vacation in Hawaii, I was happy because I expected it to mean that we would all go on vacation. But after that, they said that during that time I would spend a few days with my uncle in Alaska. I tried to rebel because I didn't want to go to my uncle in Alaska because I barely knew him and I met him maybe twice when I was little. But my complaints and arguments were in vain. They packed all my things in a suitcase and in the morning they drove me to the airport and told me to have a good time. After a couple of hours, the plane landed at the airport. And outside, my uncle was waiting for me with his truck. We greeted each other and got into his truck. The truck was dark red in color, with as much mud on it. Inside the truck, the seats were torn as if they had been cut with a knife or a sharp object. And the floor of the truck was completely rusty and there were holes in many places. The drive to his house was long and awkward. He lived far away in the mountains and it took a couple of hours to get to his house. During the drive we tried to talk a little about anything about weather and politics. But it was short-lived and we spent most of the ride in silence and there was no radio in his truck. When we arrived in front of his house, the house looked old. It had a ground floor and another floor. In front of the house was a pile of wood with a log and a red axe stuck in it. A little away from the house there were 3 dogs that barked at us when we arrived. They barked partly out of happiness and partly because they don't know me. I took my bag and went inside the house. The interior of the house was nice and in better condition than it seemed from the outside. It was equipped like any normal house. The only thing that caught my attention was the rifle that was hanging on the wall. It seems to me that it was a carbine. The barrel of the rifle shone in the light. My uncle noticed that I was looking at a rifle and said it was his favorite rifle. When I unpacked I helped my uncle with the chores. I fed his 3 dogs and after that they didn't bark at me anymore and they even wanted to play with me. One dog was bronze, the second tricolor and the third was completely black with a little white on the tail. The first 2 were very sociable dogs while the third dog growled when he ate his food, but when he did not eat he was also sociable. My uncle told me they were hunting dogs when I asked him about the dog breed. The sun began to set and the night began. We had dinner and then sat down and talked. My uncle took the rifle off the wall and started cleaning it. He said he was going hunting tomorrow and if I wanted to go with him. I thought for a few minutes about his proposal and decided to agree because I wouldn't know what to do alone tomorrow. When he heard that I wanted to go, he told me in a serious tone to go to bed earlier because we get up at 5 in the morning tomorrow. I took his advice and went to bed earlier, but enough sleep didn't help me wake up in the morning because I just wasn't used to getting up so early and I'm not an early riser. I overslept the alarm. My angry uncle woke me up shaking me to get up. After I woke up, I got up but I was sleepy. I washed myself outside with cold water that woke me up completely. Then I put on the boots and camouflage suit my uncle gave me. We tied the dogs and put them in the trunk of the truck. And before we went to my surprise he gave me a double-barreled rifle. I told him that I had never fired a rifle in real life, only in video games. But he said that the rifle he gave me was a good beginner rifle and that I would get used to it. During the ride, he told me a couple of rules about hunting, nothing special, what to shoot and how to use a walkie-talkie. After that, he took a piece of paper out of his pocket and told me to read it and follow everything written on it without question. This surprised me. But seeing that it was serious, I took the paper and started reading. Rules for hunting. Number 1. There will be 6 of us on the hunt. If you see other people in the woods, run away and throw something behind you. This will confuse them enough, giving you time to escape. Don't let them catch you. Shoot them if you have to. Number 2. During the hunt we may put you by the river. While you are there be careful. Due to the proximity of the rivers you will hear things. If you hear the barking of dogs, ignore them. If you hear human screaming you have to go in the direction of that screaming and kill whatever you find there. Number 3. If you meet my dogs in the woods, call them to yourself. You are safer while they are close to you. If the dogs start walking in a circle around you, it means that something has smelled your scent and is now chasing you. Inform me immediately and head for the truck and go inside and lock the door. Number 4. Because of the large terrain on which we hunt, we use walkie-talkies for communication. During the conversation, we never use our names, only nicknames. If someone from our group calls you by name, listen carefully to what they say. If they tell you that they are in one part of the forest, avoid that part of the forest for that day. If they ask you where you are or come to them, then slowly and without panic go to the truck and go home. Try not to make noise and move as much as you can in the woods and never on the road. Number 5. When you are waiting for prey, stand by the trees. When you hear something moving, listen carefully. If the steps are like gallops, stand by the tree and shoot. If the steps are slow and strange, climb the tree and be quiet. Number 6. When you kill the prey, immediately skin it and pack the meat in a backpack and leave the place. They are attracted by blood. I read the rules and thought this was some kind of joke. But before I could ask him, we arrived at the assembly point where 4 more hunters were waiting for us. When I met the hunters, we agreed on a plan and actions that we will do in the hunt. They explained to me where there are good places to wait for prey, and then we sent everyone to their place. I was waiting at the place where they told me to wait first. It was on the old road around which there were a lot of trees. The road was dug a long time ago, but no one uses it for years except hunters and wild animals. So I jumped in fear when I heard someone's voice. I turned around and tried to find out where the voice was coming from. At the other end of the road, which was overgrown with thorns and bushes, I saw a red cap sticking out of the bushes, and the old man was wearing a cap. He told me that he was stuck in a thorn and that he could not go out alone and if I could help him. Seeing the old man, I relaxed. I saw that the thorns and bushes were very thick where the old man was, and I set out to help him. And just as I approached him halfway, I remembered the first rule. I stood still and started sweating. The old man noticed my behavior and laughed. Suddenly his eyes changed. They were no longer the eyes of an old man, but a bloodthirsty predator. Like a predator, he jumped out of the bushes from an ambush and rushed towards me. I tried to run away, but he was very fast. If I don't do something, he will catch me. Then I took a breath, turned my rifle at the old man and pulled the trigger. The loudness of the shot made my ears ache and I couldn't hear anything for a few seconds. The first bullet hit him in the chest and the second in the head, which immediately exploded from the force of the blow. There was blood everywhere. When I saw the blood, I started to panic because what if this was just some crazy old man and I would go to prison for murder? But then the old man's body got up and threw itself into the woods. When I saw that, I ran away from that place. On the walkie-talkie, I told my uncle what happened and what happened to the old man's body afterwards. He told me that it was normal and that I should go to another location that is closer to the river. The river was big and noisy. I could barely hear the conversation over the walkie-talkie. After half an hour of standing, I heard the barking of dogs. Their barking could be heard even from the river. But I stayed where I was and ignored their barking and prayed I wouldn't hear a human screaming. But as if on command, after about 15 minutes I heard a human scream that scared me. The scream sounded like a man being tortured. I gathered all the courage I had and I headed in the direction of that screaming. As I approached, I heard the screaming louder and louder. When I came to the place where the screaming was heard, I saw something that I will never forget. The dogs attacked the prey. It seems to me that it was a deer, but it looked wrong. His spine was crooked, and he moved unnaturally, sometimes on all fours and sometimes on 2 legs. He had hands like human hands with fingers. And his eyes looked like human ones, they were blue. After a few minutes of unsuccessful fighting, the dogs overpowered him and knocked him to the ground. Then he started screaming even more. Seeing some strange deer screaming just like a man was almost traumatic. And then he saw me. His blue eyes looked at me as if begging me to help him. I didn't know what to do, whether to help him or follow the rules. Meanwhile, the dogs started biting him and tearing his skin. The creature began to scream even more. In one last attempt to get out alive, the creature started begging me in English to help him. I stood as if in some fear. I didn't know what to do. This whole situation was unreal for me. The dogs became more bloodthirsty, their attacks and bites became more and more brutal. Then I decided to help him. I loaded my rifle and shot him in the head, but due to the constant movement of his head to the side, I hooked his horns. Seeing what was happening, the creature started to resist even more and tried to get up. Somehow he managed to get the dogs off him and started running uphill towards the trees, where I shot him once more and hit him. He rolled down and then I finished him with a shot to the chest. My uncle called me over the walkie-talkie to ask if I had killed anything. I told him that rule number 2 had happened. He told me to take a knife and skin the creature and pack the meat in my backpack and reward the dogs. I'm not a fan of blood and I'm disgusted with it, so the process of skinning the creature was difficult for me and I did it badly. But in the end, I finally finished skinning the creature and packed the meat in my backpack, giving a little to the dogs as a reward. I was on my way back to the truck, and then one of the hunters called me by my name. I was about to miss it because I turned down the volume on the walkie-talkie, but luckily I heard it. Everything around me stopped, it got cold, the birds stopped singing, and the dogs disappeared. He asked me where I was and that he was heading in my direction. I tried not to panic. I was moving slowly through the woods and suddenly my phone rang. I quickly tried to end the call and I forgot to turn down the volume. My parents called me and they probably wanted to see how I was and what I was doing. I quickly ended the call, but too late. I heard the rapid breaking of branches and in an instant I hid behind a tree. A hunter came out of the bushes and trees. He had no eyes, there were 2 black holes where his eyes were and his blood was running down his face. He started calling me by name, and tried to trick me into giving up my position. I was silent, and as time went on he became more and more angry. He practically shouted my name. He went around blindly, but I saw that sooner or later he would find me if I stay where I am. I needed a plan on how to get out of this situation alive. I took 1 bullet I had and 2 stones, one I put on the ground a few feet away from me and a bullet on it, and the other stone was bigger. My plan was to throw a stone at that bullet which would then explode and make enough noise, giving me time to run far enough to create a distance between me and him. After that, it will take me a few minutes to get to the truck. Although it was a crazy idea, I was running out of time, and I decided to realize my plan. I placed a stone and a bullet on it and counted to 3, and then I threw a stone at the bullet. The bullet exploded, the hunter grabbed his head and started to scream, and then I just started running. I ran until I saw a red truck with my uncle waiting for me to leave. When I got in the truck we immediately left. We arrived home 2 hours later. We tied up the dogs and hung the meat to dry. My uncle praised me and said I was good for my first hunt. He acted as if everything that happened today was normal, and that bothered me. I angrily told him that this is not normal and what is wrong with this forest and why he did not warn me before this but gave me a piece of paper with rules like some weirdo. He apologized but admitted that he did not want to tell me in advance what was happening in the forest because he thought I would give up immediately. He promised to explain to me from now on what was happening in different parts of the forest and to explain to me why this forest is like this. And that night he told me all about this forest and I understood why my uncle was a hunter.